Welcome to Module 1 on Risk Communication. Risk communication refers to the real-time exchange of information, advice, and opinions between experts or officials and people who face a threat or hazard to their survival, health, or economic or social well-being. The ultimate purpose is that everyone at risk is able to take informed decisions to mitigate the effects of the threat or the hazard, such as disease outbreak, and take a protective and preventative action. What are the guiding principles for communication best practice? 1. To create and maintain trust. Trust is the greatest factor in communicating risk. It is strengthened or weakened when officials speak. To build trust among people, it is important to show that you care about the people, and that you are able to address people's concerns. It's also important to tell the truth and also to be knowledgeable and know how to fix the problem. 2. Acknowledge and communicate in uncertainty. This is to ensure people can be informed about the existing emergency or risk or hazard. 3. Be transparent and fast with the first and all communications. 4. Be proactive. 5. Involve and engage those affected. This is to make them understand about the situation or the risk, and this builds trust within the community. Identify people whom the community trusts and build relationships with them and involve them in decision-making to ensure that interventions are collaborative and contextually appropriate, and that the community owns the process of communication. 6. Use integrated approaches. This will make sure that information reaches the community and understands the problem at hand. What risk communication approaches are there? We have public communication, media communication, social media, reputation management and institutional communications, mass awareness campaigns, health promotion, community engagement, partner engagement, as well as social mobilization. How do we select a risk communication strategy? This is a 3-step process, with step 1 being assess the risk. When you assess the risk, you are assessing the magnitude of the problem or the hazard, finding out whether the problem is big or is small. Assessing the risk. Is the risk coming in the future? Is the risk imminent? This helps to measure the level of preparedness to the risk or hazard. You assess the level of exposure to the hazard or risk to determine the magnitude of people by the hazard or the risk. Lastly, you assess the vulnerability of the population versus the capacity to deal with the hazard. Step 2, you gauge the risk perception of those at risk or affected. Usually, they are more worried and concerned about the risk or the hazard when there is a high level of morbidity or mortality, when high numbers of people are at a risk of being infected by a disease, or a higher number of people are at a risk of dying from the disease, or when there is a high level of disability, or a high level of financial loss. This is when business community is facing financial loss. Experts are concerned about the risk. They want to address the problem so that they continue to make profits. Or a political loss. In emergency or crisis, experts and politicians are concerned about political loss if the hazard is not addressed. Public perception about the risk. People are less concerned about health risks that are voluntary. This is when communities are not, that requires the public own will to control. Or if the risk is familiar, this is a risk that they already know. Or a controllable risk, one that is preventable or can be controlled by self. A risk that is moderate, it is fair. A chronic risk, these are risks These are risks or hazards that take a long time to go away or to end, or a risk that is not fatal, that are not life-threatening. People are usually more concerned about risks that are involuntary. These are risks or hazards that are over their control. Risks that are unfamiliar, something that they have never experienced. Risks that are uncontrollable, that they cannot manage or control, which makes them feel a danger. Risks that are controlled by others are unfair, are acute. These are risks that take a short period of time for a person to perceive the danger. Risks that are fatal, where people can die. So the most appropriate risk communication strategy, how do we choose it? There are 4 risk communication strategies that we can use during an emergency, and these include health education, stakeholder relations, outrage management, precautionary advocacy, and crisis communication. When determining the appropriate risk communication strategy to use, it is critical to look at the emotional response of the people affected and those at risk. That whether there is apathy, fear, outrage among the people. Together, you also need to determine whether the hazard is small or big. We will look at precautionary advocacy. If the hazard or the health risk is big, but the population show apathy or they are not concerned about the existing public health risk, it is important to arouse their emotions or raise their outrage to the level of your concern by providing information about the reality and magnitude of the problem for them to understand. You provide information that makes the community fear the repercussions about the disease so that they can take action to prevent the risk. For example, these are deaths associated with the hazard or the severity of the disease. This approach is termed precautionary advocacy. Second strategy, management. When the affected or at-risk population is outrageous, or they are afraid, or they perceive at high risk of the disease or hazard, but the hazard is small. It is important to listen to their concerns and their worries and acknowledge and tell the truth about the situation. Tell the community the facts about why there is no danger to the affected community. This helps to calm down the fear levels in the community. This strategy is called outrage management. Our third strategy is crisis communication. When the hazard and the affected populations are outrageous or the fear of the situation or crisis, it is important to communicate with the affected at-risk population about what is happening. You listen to their concerns and deal with their emotions. Also, you ensure that you will work together with them to address the problem affecting their community. Be transparent. This strategy is termed crisis communication. The fourth strategy is called health education and stakeholder relations. In this instance, if the hazard or the risk is small and there is apathy, the affected people are less concerned or interested about the health risk among the affected people or population, it is critical to do communication surveillance, which involves the gathering of information from the affected community on how they feel about the problem and the reason why their community is not interested. It is therefore important to conduct health education and engage the community about the risk so that they become aware of the problem. We have come to the end of the